don't think there's much question that usually 2 years into any administration, you'll see an impact in terms of the party in power, and I think that from all the polls you look at, that looks likely for November. How much, how big a wave it is, I don't think anybody really knows at this point. As to Paul Ryan leaving as Speaker, you know, I'm a believer, having been a member of Congress, that elections are won based on the candidates in each of those districts and how effectively they campaign to the constituents in those districts. I'm not sure whether Paul Ryan's leaving has very much impact in terms of what happens in November.
Mr. Secretary, I guess it's fair to say that the president is not a traditional Republican. Is it possible that we're overestimating the impact on what's able to be done in the face of a Democrat Congress, given he's already pushed through certain parts of his agenda already? Perhaps this makes things like infrastructure more likely.
Well, I'm a believer that checks and balances works in our political system, and if the president should in fact have a Democratic House and Senate, if he's smart enough to negotiate with the Democrats, he could get some things done. So I'm not a believer that if the Democrats take charge, that the president will get absolutely nothing done. It will depend on whether or not the president is really willing to deal with the opposition. Bill Clinton did that with a Republican Congress, and he did it pretty effectively.
James Comey is on a promotional tour right now for his book, and he's going out there calling the president all sorts of names, talking about insinuations about, you know, his tanning bed behavior and much more than that. This is a man who still would be FBI director if he hadn't been fired right now. Do you think he's hurt the standing of the FBI in doing all of this?
Well, I'm a little concerned about the level of rhetoric going on generally. I think the bar has been lowered so that that type of discussion seems to happen every day. And there's no question that it does have an impact, I think, on the reputation, certainly, of the FBI, but for that matter, on the reputation of this president, whatever's left of it. So it's just not a good time. And I would prefer, frankly, that all sides focus on some of the very important issues that are facing our country and facing our world. That's what they ought to be talking about.
Mr. Secretary, one phrase we hear from the president fairly often is the quality of the U.S. military, about being the greatest and most powerful in the world. What's your take on how powerful the military is relative to certain other countries today versus a decade ago? Have they in fact played catch up, particularly when you consider the ability to attack the United States with cyber threats these days?
Well, I don't think there's any question that the United States military force is the strongest on the face of the earth. We are the strongest military power on earth for a lot of reasons. Basically, our men and women in uniform probably at the top of the list, but also our technology and our capability. We did pay a price with the budget. When the budget cut the defense budget and the Congress implemented the sequester, which was a cut across the board, I think it did impact on the readiness of our military force. And my hope is that as a result of what Congress did, that there will be an effort now to repair that damage and be able to strengthen our military, because we are going to face an awful lot of threats in this world. There are a number of flashpoints that are out there, and in particular, the threat of cyber war, which is the battlefield of the future. All of that needs to be addressed.
And Mr. Secretary, what should the threshold be for U.S. intervention? Should it be cyber? Should it be conventional slaughter of civilians like we're seeing in Syria? Should it be chemical weapons being used, which of course we saw a response to? What threshold would you like to see?
Well, I think the United States has always taken the position that military force should be the last option. And I believe that that should be the case as well. But the fact is that just as we saw with Syria, there comes a point at which the President of the United States has to make a decision to deploy our military in order to make sure that our credibility is protected in the world. So the use of our military has to be used with good judgment and discretion. We have capabilities. We have remarkable capabilities to be able to address particular situations, whether it's counterterrorism, whether it's the kind of military strike we saw the other day, or whether it's dealing with cyber threats. We have remarkable capabilities. And it is up to our generals and to the national security team and the president to make sure that we use that kind of power effectively and with good judgment.
Mr. Secretary, are you concerned that things could elevate in the war of words currently with Russia, given issues in Syria, given issues in the United Kingdom as well? Do you think things could elevate to a military level anytime soon?
You know, there's no question we're in a new chapter of the Cold War with Russia. Russia has been very aggressive going into the Ukraine, going into Crimea, going into Syria, implementing the kind of cyber attack that we saw in the last election, doing the kind of impact on Russian agents in Britain, poisoning them with nerve agents. I mean, there are an awful lot of steps that the Russians are taking to be very aggressive. And I think part of it is because they've read weakness into the United States as well as our allies, and Putin has felt that he can do those kinds of things. I think it is very important to make clear to Putin and to Russia that there are lines that we will not allow them to cross. We've got to deal with Putin from strength, not from weakness. If we do that, if we are very clear that there are lines that cannot be crossed by the Russians in the world that we're dealing with today, then I think it can open up the opportunity to have discussions with Putin with regards to issues. But the only way you deal with Putin is from strength, not from weakness.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.